have in studio some folks that were left behind in a different sense than what we often talk about on this program, left behind because a loved one took their own life. Dr. Marcus Bachman is speaking into it professionally as a clinical therapist with his own counseling care business. And I want to move to Chuck and Cindy because their tragedy is recent, and they lost their daughter, Caitlin. And here's what I learned about Caitlin. And again, folks, we are just touching on the bare bones basic because that's radio. She was a strong Christian. She was a student at Bethel University. She loved the Lord. She went on missions trips. She was a very well-adjusted young lady. And she was actually doing counseling internship, and she loved it. She said, "This is where I want to be." In other words, Caitlin wanted to help people. And I doubt that anybody thought that they were going to come home and discover a tragedy. And this is just a couple of years ago, 2.5, less than 3 years ago. And welcome, Chuck and Cindy, to Understanding the Times Radio. But you folks, you just went out for dinner, and you came back that day. And tell us what happened.
That's right. It was October of 2012. And Caitlin had, in September, a few weeks earlier, had been out jogging and running. And she passed out while she was running. And she fell down and hit her head, landed square on her forehead, and knocked her out. There was actually an RN that was running behind her that was there that called the ambulance. Then they called Cindy and I to meet her up at the hospital. And so we picked her up. We brought her home that night to observe her. And the next morning she woke up and wasn't feeling real well and thought that she would take a bath. And she went into the bathroom and she passed out again and hit her head on the side of the tub. And we took her to the hospital, and the doctor said that she sustained her second concussion on the other side of her head.
In how many days? Just a day or two?
Within hours.
Just hours apart.
Yeah, the evening before when she was running, it was probably 6, 7 o'clock at night, and the next morning it was 7 o'clock, maybe mid-morning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Within a 24-hour period.
Do you think it was these concussions that threw something off in the brain?
Absolutely.
That's what we believe. Yeah, yeah. We think that we know that had caused some confusion, and we had taken her to the doctor and a neurologist. They said that we just needed to continue to watch her, and her moods were up and down, and we thought she was making some real progress.
And then, Cindy, how much later before this tragedy happened?
About a month and a half.
And
afterwards.
so were there signs then in that month and a half? Did you see warning signs, or was this a total shock?
Well, warning signs, as the neurologist gave us a list of things to look for people who have had severe concussions, and they did say that second concussion is always the worst because now you really traumatized the brain. And so, yes, there were signs of what we thought were concussion signs, leaving water running, memory, confusion, things like that. They were all on the list. We were supposed to watch them, though. Did we realize that what was the fight that she was having going on? Do you realize that? I don't even think she could communicate actually that to us, because that's how much there was such a flip side. We went on a very beautiful family vacation the last week in August with all our family members together, and September 1st was the first day of school, and that was at 6 o'clock at night that she went for this run and passed out and had this concussion. And there was just like a flip side. There was a flip side of from that to this. And I just think there was some severe brain damage that happened.
Marcus Bachman, help us understand this. Is this a brain chemical situation here?
This situation, without giving a diagnosis to the specifics, it certainly seems like there was something that occurred there chemistry-wise. I think we have to be really careful not to think in terms of, should we have been watching for something? Should we have understood things better? Should we have known? Obviously, you are unbelievably good parents, but we cannot understand what happens inside a private world and the complications that happen within that cause depression. Neurologically, something was going on, obviously, and yes, it appears that gave a cause here for something of this depth of depression, but we can always see and understand those signs.
Folks, there is a video that you can tap into if you'd like to purchase it and better understand this phenomenon. And again, it would minister most to anybody anybody out there who's lost a loved one in the vein that we're talking about today, that would be by way of suicide. But again, it might minister to anybody going through loss. I've done programs on loss here, and extremely popular because loss is loss. And Jim, we're going to give a phone number and a website. And the best phone number, I'll have you give it. Go ahead.
Is 612-729-9162. That's 612-729-9162.
And you can order online, and that's going to be engagesdg.org. Engagesdg.org. I know that's hard to understand, but it's engagesdg.org. And you'll find a wealth of resources there, endorsements, and we'll talk about a study guide a little bit later. In your story, you say you don't want your experience to go for naught, therefore you want to help people.
Right.
So you have come out with this film idea, the study guide idea.
I said, actually, the day Laura died, to my friend Bob, I said to him, I have to do something about this situation, otherwise Laura would have died in vain.
Mm-hmm.
And Jan, one of the ways they might be able to remember the latter part of the Engage SDG is to remember that the SDG stands for Sola Deo Gloria, which is Latin for God's glory alone.
God's glory alone. Okay. I want to go back. I don't want to quite leave Chuck and Cindy yet, because Cindy, when we were gathering here today, we talked a little bit about how the Lord ministered to you, and this is hugely important, I think. And you sensed, I heard this on the video, you sensed Caitlin, your daughter, saying to you at some point, and this wasn't audibly, but you sensed her saying, Mom, don't try to figure it out. That brought peace.
I just think God has a bigger picture here for us, for all of us, and there is a big picture, and he's not a God of answers all the time, but he is a God of forgiveness and love and compassion. She knew me well enough that I'm going to search for every answer there was for this. And she was saying, you know what, Mom, don't even try to figure out. You know what, there's a bigger picture here, and God has it. It's in his hands, and I'm just fine. It's beautiful here. And so, to me, what more do I need to know than she's with him?
And I had another mom here in studio sitting right where you are, Melody, and she lost her 22-year-old Bethel student daughter on a freeway here in town, Twin Cities. And that was her perspective. And she's making it just fine with that perspective.
Yeah.
She has an eternal perspective. We're going to see each other again, probably sooner rather than later. And so she's doing fine, but not to minimize. I don't mean to do that at all. But when we're blessed enough to have that perspective, remember, much of the world doesn't have that.
Right.
And I'm sure that's meaningful to you too, Chuck.
Yes, it is. And, I think what Cindy touched on, the fact that we don't always have the answers. And over the last 2.5 years, we struggled with that. We've prayed about that. We've looked for answers. But the conclusion that we've come to is that we don't stand on God's answers. We stand on his promises. And it's the promises that we have where we find our hope and we find our strength. And it's his promises that are above our circumstances.
Amen.
And I think that, we talk about what can the church do, what can the people do. I think it's sometimes we want to find answers when we want to help somebody, when we want to comfort somebody. We want to be able to have answers for them. But really the best thing that people can do is come alongside someone and share God's promises with them, because in the promises is the healing and is the hope that we have.